Classic movies are really fascinating. They can be terrible, they can be good, they can be timeless, they can be really problematic. Sometimes a movie will just be obliterated by the passage of time. They might have been great at their time and they're very important films, but unless you're a film student, like I was, I would never recommend anybody watching them. So that's the point of this series. I'm going to assume that you as a viewer might be scrolling through HBO or Netflix and you see an old movie that you know is important, but you've never seen. But is it any good? The way I'm going to go about this is we're going to go over a few things. 1, why is this movie important? 2, what it does well. And 3, potential deal breakers. Now with all that out of the way, let's talk about Stagecoach. Stagecoach's importance to film history literally cannot be overstated. Orson Welles reportedly watched Stagecoach over 40 times before making Citizen Kane. 40 times. Stagecoach's director, John Ford, is in the running for the most influential director of all time. Every single filmmaker you like, probably minus Quentin Tarantino, respects the heck out of John Ford. Other directors from that time, like Alfred Hitchcock, might have had a more sophisticated style and was more beloved by critics, but when it comes to crowd-pleasing entertainment, there's just no one else like John Ford. Folks around the world watched his films. Legendary Japanese director Akira Kurosawa famously loved Stagecoach. And if you watch his movies, it's not hard to see the influence. Stagecoach was also John Wayne's breakout film. Before this movie, he was relegated to making small B-movie westerns. But after this film, he was the most famous actor on the planet. John Wayne is American maleness. There is no separation between the concept of the American man and John Wayne. As you might imagine, John Wayne was not his real name, which tells you kind of all you need to know about this kind of masculinity, but we don't have to go there. That's another thing. Wayne represents everything about old Hollywood. Glamour, idealism, and a deeply problematic side. 82 years is a long time, and a lot of this movie is frankly very uncomfortable to watch. We'll talk about that in detail later, but first, let's do some quick expectation setting. Yes, Stagecoach is a Western. Yes, it has John Wayne. And yes, there are guns. However, this is more of a morality play than anything else. This isn't a Sergio Leone movie where people are staring at each other for 30 minutes and then the gunfights go off in 2 seconds. It feels almost like a stage production. It's a very small sets where a bunch of interesting, colorful characters are put together and they just bounce off each other. That is what Stagecoach is. This is important to remember, so you won't be like me when I first saw this movie, wondering where the heck all the gunfights were. So what does Stagecoach do well? Well, first and foremost, it has a cast of awesome actors and great characters. Claire Trevor plays Dallas, a prostitute. When we first meet Dallas, she's being kicked out of the town for her profession. The film treats her with such respect and such kindness. It is frankly shocking to realize that this movie is 80 years old. She is never shamed once for her job, and everyone that is mean to her is clearly a villain. Sometimes with these old movies, you get these actors that are great with reactions, but as soon as they start talking, it's brutal.
I have to go, doctors, because they say so.
Now, Dallas, I've got my orders. Don't blame these ladies. It ain't them.
It is them. Doc.
And I think Claire Trevor is a good example of this. You also have John Wayne playing an outlaw, the Ringo Kid, a man that's out for vengeance to kill the man that killed his family. You've seen this before. This is a well-worn trope that John Wayne has played multiple times. You also have Andy Devine playing Buck.
Oh, now don't egg him on, kid. I'm driving this here outfit, and, well, if the soldiers go back, so am I.
Now, movies in these days, actors were two things. They were either stars or they were character actors. This film is full of character actors.
Buck says I, that's 6.
Andy Devine is one of my favorites. He has just an incredible voice. It's so squeaky. It's so fun. I mean, take a listen.
Through. Sit down, folks, and eat your grub.
Come on, Buck. We'll change them horses.
No, but Curly, ain't we gonna eat?
Later.
Oh.
This movie is a joy in a lot of ways, and Andy Devine as Buck is one of them.
And Ringo said he'll be passing this way in 6 or 7 minutes.
The other character actor that I need to talk about is Thomas Mitchell. He plays Doc Boone, an alcoholic doctor who's lost his practice. Now that makes this character sound like a tragedy, but he kind of never is.
Is this the face that wrecked 1,000 ships and burned the towerless tops of Ilium? Farewell, fair Helen.
Thomas Mitchell plays him so well, and in such a way that movies nowadays would never play a character like that this way. Doc Boone is oddly the moral center of this film. Anyone Doc Boone likes, we understand to be a good person. Anyone he disagrees with, we understand to be a bad person.
I'd just been honorably discharged from the Union Army after the War of the Rebellion.
You mean the war for the Southern Confederacy, sir?
I mean nothing of the kind, sir.
There's also Lucy, a pregnant soldier's wife, who came all the way from Virginia, all the way out west to see her husband before the baby is born. This character is sympathetic, and we understand where she's coming from. However, because she's from Virginia and was on that side of the Civil War, this film treats her as a villain.
Thank you.
Now, we can't talk about Lucy without talking about Hatfield. Now, Hatfield is such an awesome villain. Hatfield is a Southern gentleman who served for the Confederacy in the Civil War. What's so interesting about Hatfield is we know he's a villain because the film kind of sets him up as a villain. He's a gambler. He's probably shot people in the back. We know he's not a good guy, but he acts like a gentleman.
I'm offering my protection to this lady. I can shoot fairly straight if there's need for it.
That's been proved too many times, Hatfield.
And there are these fascinating interactions with him and Lucy where he goes well out of his way to make sure she's so taken care of. And watching it now, it comes across as so creepy. This film is full of telling scenes between characters. It's so interesting. Like, take a look at this little exchange here.
Just a minute, Mrs. Mallory. How about the other lady?
Thanks.
Sorry. No silver cups.
This is fun.
It's awesome little character details like that. It makes this guy so villainous. Such a piece of shit.
You wouldn't understand, cowboy. You've never seen an angel.
My other favorite villain is the banker.
And remember this, what's good for the banks is good for the country.
Awesome. Just great. He has this awesome exchange with Doc Boone that you just need to see.
Why, they're even talking now about having bank examiners. As if we bankers don't know how to run our own banks. Why, Boone, I actually had a letter from a Popinjay official saying they were going to inspect my books. I have a slogan that should be blazoned on every newspaper in the country. America for Americans. The government must not interfere with business. Reduce taxes. Our national debt is something shocking. Over $1 billion a year. What this country needs is a businessman for president.
What this country needs is more fuddle. What? Fuddle.
Your answer.
I'm happy, Gatewood. Who?
That's the best part of this movie. Those character interactions is what holds up all these years later. That's why, in my opinion, Stagecoach has the legs that it does. Some other important things to note. John Wayne has so much damn charisma. He is so freaking watchable. He has some of the best reaction shots, some of the best smiles, just the best swagger. Just watching him in a movie is pleasurable. The imagery of this film is also iconic. John Ford knew how to set up a shot. His storytelling chops are unbelievable. He directed his first film in 1917. He was there when film started to exist as a medium. He helped sculpt it. He had no formal training. This is just all raw storytelling skill. And boy, did he have a lot of it. You also can't talk about Stagecoach without talking about the stunt work. Holy shit. There was no CGI, no nothing. If you needed a man to jump onto a bunch of horses that are running full speed, you got a man to jump on horses running full speed. If you needed horses to cross a real river, you did that. This was real. Now, they had cables and stuff. They did things to hide it. But this stunt work was real, and it is jaw-dropping. Legendary stuntman Yakima Canutt does 3 of the craziest stunts I've ever seen. 1 was jumping from horses that you saw earlier. 2 is this craziness. And 3 is, well... Jesus. That is a man that literally went underneath the horses. Went right between horses, right underneath the stagecoach that was on rocks. On rocks. A wooden stagecoach on rocks, and he did that. Didn't get hurt, walked away. Unbelievable stunt work. Now, one thing you might have noticed in these stunts, you might have started to get a little uncomfortable. And that really goes to one of the most important things you need to know about this movie. A lot of it's really tough to watch. Now, Stagecoach shows its age in pretty normal ways. It can be very cheesy, it can be very cliche, and it can have some seriously stilted acting. A lot of old movies are like this. This is not new. When a movie is 80 years old, it will show its age in, somewhat conventional ways. But for me, these issues are overshadowed by 2 major problems. The animal endangerment and, well... It's sad that a lot of old westerns are often battles between cowboys and Native Americans. The reason why the western genre exists is because we expanded into native territory and took their land and then relegated them to these smaller patches of land. That is why there are people out here in the first place. Old western films never grapple with this idea, and frankly, new western films could grapple a lot more with this. Some new media, like Red Dead Redemption 2, really goes into detail about whose land you're really on. But Stagecoach really doesn't. They make no mention about how their land was taken away, how they're in poverty, how they've been betrayed, how they've been killed. We see none of that. All we see is a bunch of murderous people on a ledge getting ready to attack a stagecoach full of women and helpless people. These Apache raids were real. They really happened. Geronimo was a real person. But by leaving out why they happened, why the Apaches were in the situation they were in, why their land was taken away, without talking about any of that part, you create a deeply racist stereotype, a deeply racist character, which is frankly abhorrent. This is one of the main reasons why Stagecoach is tough to watch. I'm not saying we should take these movies off the platform. And frankly, nobody is saying that. There's one shot in particular that makes this film hard to recommend. And it's this. The soldiers out west should not be portrayed like this. People in these uniforms committed horrible atrocities against Native Americans. There have been massacre after massacre after massacre by people wearing those uniforms. We need to really grapple with what people that wore those uniforms did. And this movie just does not do that. Now, a lot of that might sound political, but then there's one part that makes this movie hard to watch that everybody can understand. The rampant animal endangerment. In those days, if you wanted a horse to trip, you tripped the horse. This is crazy dangerous, and horses definitely died. You can actually see that the filmmakers were uncomfortable with this, because you could see the horses get up after they tripped them. It's a way of telling the audience, don't worry, this horse isn't dead. Even though we tripped it like this when it wasn't expecting it. This horse isn't dead. It's fine. Look at it. It's got up. It's all good. The stuntman, he's fine. Take a look. The filmmakers knew this was wrong when they did it, and stuntmen don't do this anymore. And that's kind of all you need to know. Let's talk about some fun small stuff, like little bits and pieces that don't actually go into the big 3 categories, but I think are worth bringing up. Those might seem dumb, but I actually really love the opening theme of this movie. I mean, how could you not love that? That's incredible. I love the face of this bartender. Look at this guy. He looks like a real dude. Looks like they just found somebody in the Old West and they just threw him on camera. I love how the bartender removes the mirror when they're getting ready for the big bar brawl. It's such a fun little detail. I mentioned this before, but this movie is full of tiny little character details. For example, Hatfield, when he's shooting at the Apaches, he'll often shoot to kill. But John Wayne almost never does. He'll knock them off their horse, but that's about it. I love how fake these riding shots are. This is old-fashioned special effects, folks. In those days, when you do a shot like this, they'd be sitting on a set, and then they'd have a projector set up to play whatever's going on in the background. So it makes it especially weird the way he's like dealing with the reins when you know he's just sitting on a set and there's no horses. I love the vibe of old movies. I mean, just look at this shot. One other thing I like about this movie is it has a great last line.
Doc, I'll buy you a drink.
Just one.
And a great last shot. So, should you watch Stagecoach? Well, there's a really well-crafted movie here, with really great performances and awesome character interactions. But the treatment of Apaches is abhorrent, and the way these horses are treated feels just as bad. You know you know yourself. Should you watch it? That's your call. Thank you so much for watching.